It's a very good afternoon to the Sportsfan Radio panel and the Sportsfan Radio viewers. A couple of weeks off, but just in time for a freshen up, and plenty happening in sport, especially with the US Open, Cooter, and you've been keeping an eye on that. What's been happening?
Oh, it's great timing for us, isn't it, Professor? We get to watch a lot of the tennis with the time difference. So obviously we're into the second week now. Women's final just completed this morning, and we've now got the men's final tomorrow morning. And I would think that if you're a neutral or if you're a tennis person, then it's been a fantastic tournament to date. We obviously, as Australians, we're invested heavily in the draw with both Ajla Tomljanovic and Nick Kyrgios going quite deep. But overnight, obviously, the number one player in the world, Iga Swiatek, she got the job done in the women's final.
So she'd be happy that Ash Barty retired?
I think she'd be quite happy that Ash has retired. Certainly watching the women's Ash, and we talked about before here, Judge, is that Ash Barty plays a very different style of tennis. She's got the slice backhand, she can volley, she's got a weapon of a serve, and mentally she's very strong. So yeah, for us, we probably would have had, I think Ash probably would have won a couple of Grand Slams this year, but she hasn't, and maybe that's a great thing for tennis as well.
Cooter, my favourite player of the tournament was Tomljanovic, probably for obvious reasons, beating Serena, but I watched that match. That was extraordinary. There's one game I'm just trying to think, it was in the final set, and it was about 5. I forget what the score was, but if you saw it, you remember the game. It just went back and forth for about 6 or 7 set points, which Serena saved. Tomljanovic, I thought, was really strong. Mentally, her game stood up when others would crack under that, not only the pressure of Serena, but also that crowd was extraordinary. What was your thoughts about Tomljanovic's performance overall, and perhaps in that specific match?
We've talked about Tomljanovic a few times on the show about someone that's maybe not realised her potential yet. She's sort of a top 30 player in the world who maybe could be better, hasn't gone as far into Grand Slams as what someone with her style should. I think that particular match, Judge, and I think the game was, I think it was early on the set because there was I think it was a 14 or 15 minute service game that she had.
Yeah.
And what it was, I think she was down break points and game points, obviously, but the crowd was feral to an extent that the clapping of faults and then the clapping of double faults. The other thing that, and I know that we're always going to cop the raw draw, but the commentary of the entire match was just appalling.
Gracious.
It gave Ajla absolutely no credit for the victory. And then the actual pomp and ceremony around Serena Williams and her last match, like, good luck to Serena. But surely there was some credit due to the actual person that played against her and made it a great match. If we look back over Serena's career, and there is some things that she probably regrets, but it all starts with Sam Stosur taking it to the cleaners to win the US Open. And again, that particular year, Judge, the crowd was feral. I don't know what it is.
Was that the year she told the linesman she was going to shove the ball down her throat until she killed her?
Yeah.
Words to that effect.
Yeah.
Lovely stuff.
I think you're paraphrasing there, Judge, allegedly, but no, she said.
I think she said she's going to shove the ball down her throat. Another time she threatened to kill her, or words to that effect. And it's also was a lack of, I thought in her final speech, apart from her Serenaisms, a lack of appreciation of her opponent, who I think really played her guts out, Tomljanovic.
she actually didn't give her any credit at all. Didn't
Oh.
even mention her. So she did her farewell speech, and then Isla was given the opportunity to talk. And if you compare the two speeches, or the two interviews, I should say, I know who looks significantly better. The actual interview with Isla Tomljanovic was one of the best of the tournament. And I think it endeared her to the crowd. But for Isla, obviously, the next match was a bit like she beat Serena, and then obviously she lost in the next round. But again, wasn't like she played it well. She hit the ball well, and she's got a game style that's pretty heavy from the back of the court. Doesn't move forward a lot. Has a big forehand, and it's not a bad serve. Again, I don't think the second serve's as strong as what it should be. So, have we got someone that we can get a Grand Slam win out of? Or maybe we might. But she's a very marketable and certainly someone that could appeal to the nation. That's for sure.
Kuta, this is Ons Jabeur's second final in a row. She made the Wimbledon final. She's lost both now. What do you think that might do to her psyche going forward?
I think she's lost to the world number one in this particular tournament. Sometimes you make finals and you lose them, and you keep going, and you do eventually win one. I don't think this will impact her at all, Professor. She'll come out to Australia. She'd be every chance to go one better in Australia. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, for her to make Grand Slam finals, obviously her ranking goes up as well. The Wimbledon tournament this year was obviously a bit of an anomaly with regards to no ranking points. So that plays out. But no, certainly I think to make Grand Slam finals is a massive challenge in itself. But you've done it twice now. What's to stop you? And Raducanu didn't get there this year. I think she obviously won last year's US, and this year she struggled, to be honest. And so she may never win another Grand Slam. She's only young, and we talked about her the other week. Sorry, she's only young, but yeah, it's hard to make a Grand Slam final, let alone win one. So to play in two Grand Slam finals in a row, I think is a mighty effort.
So, just back on Tomljanovic again.
Yep.
Mighty effort to make two quarterfinals of a Grand Slam in a row. What do you think's holding her back from getting past the quarters?
I think it's just that knowledge that you're actually you're a good player. I think she's got some really good pass to game, as sort of indicated. I think her forehand and her serve are weapons. And also, Judge, I think the other thing with, and this might be the breakout, is that mentally to win that match against Serena and the 24,000 people that were on Arthur Ashe Arena was huge effort, an absolute massive effort to actually block all that out. So maybe this is the tournament that she actually goes, you know what, I do belong here. And maybe the other parts of the game is around her footwork maybe and but I think she's someone that can and certainly be a top 10 player in the world, that's for sure.
Kuta, is Serena finished? She was ambivalent at the end of her interview, but you think she's booked?
Yep, absolutely done.
Yeah.
If she's not done, then what was all the pomp and ceremony around at the US Open? I think we talked about the other week, Judge, that she didn't want to get the record. It didn't worry her, didn't matter, but she's no closer to winning a Grand Slam tournament. So I think that she'll retire. History says she's one of the best players of all time. And her legacy is what it is. She probably changed the way that tennis is played. Both her and her sister Venus certainly brought a more brutal style of tennis to the women's game and showed what power power tennis can play, power tennis can be like.
The only contra I put to that is that I think she's obsessed by Margaret Court's record. I think she's obsessed by the fact that she's referred to as the greatest with an asterisk all the time, because she knows she's not. And, you know, I hate the word greatest, as you know, but the only way you can measure best is statistical in that sense. And I think she'd look at Rafael Nadal and say, well, bloody hell, if anybody was a walking wounded a year ago, you would not have ever imagined he's done what he did this year. That defeat in the Open was, in fact, the first time he was defeated in a Grand Slam, because the only other defeat was himself. He retired hurt, but he picked up a couple. She could pick up a couple, it seems to me, particularly at Wimbledon and the US Open again. So I know what you're saying, but I do think she's a little bit obsessed by the record.
I think we all agree.
Yeah.
So is that what you play tennis for? I would think that the competitive juices, well, they did appear to be there. They did appear to be there, but I don't know whether she can get there, if that makes sense. And maybe it's the willing to do it, but I can't see her winning another Grand Slam if she does decide to play it on. And if it is on the grass or whatever it is, Judge, I just can't see her winning another one.
Yeah, Cooter, I'd take the bet more likely to make a major final, Tomljanovic, than Serena.
Yeah. And she's not as intimidating on the court as what she used to be either, Judge.
That is true. Yeah. Well, she invented this game, and now they've all just perfected it.
Like the other night, Isla had every right to walk out in court and should be this sort of just part of the stage show that was being put on by the US Tennis Association, and Serena having her bag carried out by a bloke wearing the T-shirt GOAT and all this sort of stuff. I think it was 15 minutes between, like, I was on court and then Serena comes out after, I think it was about 10 or so minutes, because they're showing highlights of Serena's career.
It just shows again the class of Tomljanovic, I think.
Yeah.
She had every right to be a little bit miffed by all that.
And of course, she's one of the power, or her and Berrettini are a fairly good tennis couple, aren't they? So.
All right, Cooter. Well, moving on to the women's doubles, although there's no Australian representative in the final, it's all Czech versus all US pairings. Storm Sanders and Ellen Perez, both in separate teams, made the semis. So that's good news for Australian tennis as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk a bit more about Storm shortly, but she's now making a pretty successful career out of doubles. I think she's her married name will be Storm Hunter, which is one of the great names going forward. But no, she's had a terrific, and I think it started with the Olympics, and yeah, she made the semi-finals. Obviously, as you said, Professor made the semi-finals of the doubles, and lost in three. So it was a tight match, and then Perez played with, and Perez was number 10 seed as well. Lost to the 3 seeds, Krejcikova and Sinikova, and that was 3-6, 7-6, 3-6. So tight sets, and both were 3 setters. Now the winners get a $688,000 paycheck, and the finalist and the runner-up gets a $344,000 paycheck. So it's not bad money.
It's not bad money at all.
So, so I think you'd have to go. Obviously, the finals, the number 3 seeds playing unseeded 2 Americans. So that could be a pretty hostile environment, Professor, for that one.
For Krejcikova and Sinikova.
Yes, that's right. Yes. But yeah, the top seeds, they sort of got knocked out the round 2. And not to have your top two seeds or a seeded pair make the final. It's a terrific effort. So they might ride the hometown wave and might upset the three seeds.
Let's stay on Storm Standers or Storm Hunter, as she will be known. Paired in the mixed double with John Pearce, who's had a lot of success in inverted commas without really taking off the big one. He and Storm beat Roger Vasselin and Flipkins in 3 sets to win the mixed doubles.
They did. So the mixed doubles judge is a super tiebreaker, or it's a third set breaker. So the first to 10 by 2 points. So it turns out that sometimes that can be the best part of 6 games with the number of points. But John obviously had a terrific tournament in the mixed with Storm. They were seeded number 4, so an All-Australian team, and they had to win a Grand Slam mixed doubles title is terrific for John. Obviously, he's won an Australian Open previously, and I think Judge, Professor, if you want to see what tennis means to John and his family, you just need to look at the Instagram account and you'll see that John's wife Danielle and the 2 kids are both on court with him at one stage, and one's holding the trophy and following Daddy's giving out autographs. And I think that speaks volumes for the sort of person and family man that John is. But he had some success leading into the tournament with Dan Evans from Great Britain. But at the US Open, he played with Alexei Popyrin, and I think they lost for the first round of the men's doubles. So obviously be disappointed with that. But with the Australian Open coming up, he's had good success there. So not sure who his partner will be. But Sanders is one that has now sort of, I think, played some singles, but I think will play doubles now, or play a lot more doubles and make a fairly successful career out of that, Professor. And we've seen that work for some of the female tennis players that just play doubles, and like Stoser is a bit the same.
All right, Cooter, let's look at the men's now. Before we look at the final, Nick Kyrgios beat in the quarterfinals by Kachanov. In 5, unluckily that in the 5th set, as I recollect, there was 1 break of serve, and that was Kyrgios, and he lost 6-4 in the 5th. So, look, it's new territory for him, isn't it, getting to quarterfinals and finals, because he's never usually been in the tournament that long before. And especially in the quarterfinal, to go to 5 sets and only just lose, I think says something about his improvement in fitness, his improvement in attitude. Although I've got to say, I wouldn't like to be his tennis racket after that game.
That's what a lot of the focus was on. Channel 9 and whoever it was focused on the fact that he smashed 2 rackets straight after the match. Now, Kachanov did the same thing against him previously, and we didn't highlight that. So Nick to make the quarters, I think backing up from Wimbledon, we were always sort of a bit, could we get 2 great Grand Slams in a row from Nick? I think the French Open we're not too fussed about. It's a tournament that Dale's got that mortgage on, and then the Spanish play a different brand. But the match that Nick played against the number 1 in the world, Medvedev. Now, if the grandstand was 3 meters further back, Medvedev would stand 3 meters further back. I don't know how he does it. He stands 5 meters behind the baseline, as far behind the baseline as anyone you'll see. And he manages to chase everything down. His defensive tennis is amazing. And that actual match was an absolute cracking. It was one of the matches of the tournament. Nick, as we said, he's got one of the best serves that we've seen. The ability to hit second serves at 200 kilometres an hour and back yourself in. It was interesting the other night that the commentators said that Nick just needs a break and the set's technically his, and I think he then got broken straight away. So the old commentator's curse, but from a pure perspective, his serve is amazing. His forehand is a weapon. But it's interesting that his game's also improved, and Judge, you might think the same here, but his game's improved by actually playing doubles. And that's the return of serve, ability to get to the net and volley, but also some court craft as well. Now, we know he does the underarm serves and he does the hot dogging and all this sort of stuff, but some of the drop shots he hit the other night and when he chose to come to net and volley, but he's actually returning the serve sometimes inside the baseline, and that's on the back of doubles.
That's a fascinating point, I reckon, about the doubles, and I actually agree with you. The other thing about which just plays into that, he said before he doesn't really care about tennis. Well, he bloody well does now. That racket smashing afterwards, quite apart from the fact I totally hate it, it just shows that he's actually keen in the game. The only bit doubles is it becomes a team sport. It's not all about you, and it's all about your partner relying upon you, and there is that discipline. And you're absolutely right about the game is different because you've got to play more shots. That one of the things, a set point straight down the line past the guy on the net. That was a perfect double shot, and it requires absolute precision to be able to do it. Not many players can do it. So I think it's actually honing his game.
A lot of what he does, a lot of people can't do. And his backhand, and we've talked about it with Roddy last time, is that his backhand doesn't get enough credit for being such a solid shot. And at times he can just get in rallies, but then there's other times where he'll actually use the backhand to generate points and easy points. So we've said it before, he's got all the talent in the world, mentally, if he applies himself, but maybe something. And I think the Patrick McEnroe interview after the Medvedev match I think he asked him when it started to click, and he said, well, it's taken 27 years. So his after-match interviews are always, I think they're good. If you ask a stupid question, you probably get a stupid response. But when you've got someone like a Patrick McEnroe doing the interview, he's got a bit of credibility. He gets the best out of him. And I thought that match and then the interview afterwards was, was pretty good for the tournament.
Cooter, has de Minaur reached the, as we like to say, the apotheosis of his career? Has he gone as far as he probably will, given his limitations physically?
Oh, it's a hard one. He probably has, Judge. He's got everything out of himself. He plays a brutal game on his body.
Yeah.
Now that's why I think the Nadal, and why we should be appreciating Nadal so much, is that Nadal isn't finesse. He's nothing. He is just a competitor that is a brute. And the way his body, I know it started to pack up on him a little bit, but he won a Grand Slam. That match at the Australian Open this year, I don't know how the hell he won that, but his body got him over the line, and he's mentally, I don't think we'll see anyone quite like him. But from de Minaur, pardon?
And Djokovic might be. He's also mentally incredibly strong.
Well, he's coming back. He's going to play the Australian Open. I think Craig Tiley's going to fly him out in a private jet and carry his bags for him. But yeah, Alex de Minaur, he's a top 30 player, and I don't know if he's any higher. But again, he had a year. I think he was coming off an injury interrupted year last year. So maybe he can get a bit higher, but I don't think he's going to be that sort of player that, like, if you compare him and Kyrgios, they're two different players and two different styles. And that's probably harsh on Alex, but at the end of the day, he doesn't have that big stroke to be able to get 3 points, which Kyrgios and most of the top players have a big shot that they're able to sort of bank on. So
that's why I was always impressed. Afternoon, gents, about Leighton Hewitt never had that big weapon, but he had some sort of heart.
Yeah, and if you look back at Leighton, he in an era where the big three were sort of coming through with him and after him. You look back at Hewitt and when he beat Federer in the Davis Cup at, I was going to say Kooyong. It was on grass at Vodafone, I think it was. And you look at that sort of event, and he was beating Roger most times. But now they're sort of, you can't quite say that anymore. But he had the heart and size of an ox, and he would win games purely based around the fact that he knew he could play 5 sets, play for 5 hours, and grind away.
I watched him sometimes at the Australian Open. I'd be almost ready for a bacon and egg roll. He'd play that long.
All right, Kudo, the men's final tonight, Carlos Alcaraz, who I tipped to win the French, but he got tipped out in the quarterfinals, the 3rd seed against the 5th seed, Casper Ruud, who was beaten by Nadal in the French. Who do you think will win and why?
I think the winner, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I think the winner becomes the number 1 player in the world, don't they?
Yes.
So Alcaraz is someone that we've talked about. You tipped him to win the French. He's had a great tournament. He's played the last 2 matches have both been 5-setters, down and out a couple of times, found a way to win. The match against Francis Tiafoe, and Dan Budley would be happy to see that the Americans have got a player that sort of has made them relevant again in the men's section. So Francis, obviously, they lost 6-3 in the 5th to Alcaraz. And then that strong tennis nation, Paul, of Norway.
Oh. They normally prefer the ski jump there, I think. But,
So Casper Ruud obviously beat Kachanov in 4 sets and really wasn't pushed too hard. The Alcaraz match went for 4 hours, and the quarterfinal that he had Professor against one of the other rising stars in world tennis in Sinner. How's this? How would you be with this? 5 hours, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And what, again, was one of the matches of the tournament. So we get the final that of 2 young, sort of up-and-coming sort of stars. And I will back Alcaraz in, but I think it'll be a great final.
All right, and just rounding out the US Open, Kuda, the men's doubles, the household names of Ram and Salisbury playing Kuloff and Skupski.
And that's right. So again, Professor, you're chuckling away there, but you got the number 1 and 2 seeds in the world, or the seeded for the tournament, and they got through to the final, and the top seeds won at 7-6, 7-5. So men's doubles at that level it's interesting to watch the way they play. There's not a lot of rallies, and a lot of it's about brute power and the first serve and the cross or whatever it is. So I didn't get to see any of that. I'm sure it would have been a high standard. But yeah, they win the Grand Slam. They win the last Grand Slam event of the year.
Well, there wasn't much in it, Kuda. 7-6, 7-5. There wasn't much wiggle room in any of those sets.
No, I think it's again, that's what men's doubles is about. It's if you get a break, you really, the set's nearly done, because most of the serves are pretty big, but also that the way that they play with the volley. It's tight. From our perspective, we obviously had the special Ks going. and they lost. I think they lost in the third round. They actually lost to, again, the household names of Glasspool and Hello Vara. From I think he's from Finland, that bloke. So, but the men's doubles, yeah. So the results here, you look at them and they go like 7-5, 4-6, 7-6, a lot of three setters. So the top seeds had tight three setters in the third, the quarters, in the semis. They also had a tight three setter. So it would have been good tennis, and I think there's a reason probably why they're the number one pair in the world.
Cooter, I fact-checked myself. Serena didn't deny saying that she's going to shove the ball down the lineswoman's throat, but she did deny the lineswoman saying that she was going to kill her. So you're
Okay.
right. I overcooked that egg, but it was still pretty ordinary. The whole thing.
Yeah.
You didn't wish her a happy holiday season. I know that much.
All right, thanks for that, Cooter. Much appreciated on wrapping up the US Open. Paul, NRL men's finals kicked off on Friday night, but before we get to the games, let's talk about Taylor May and Peter V'landys and why a two-match suspension isn't served until next year, because that's good for the fans.
Well, it was an important video clip because he tucked his shirt in. He loves that shirt out more than a tradie, Peter V'landys. So the fact that it looked like the shirt was tucked in, he might have even had his tie done up as well, I think. So obviously knew the importance of the message. Correct me if I'm wrong, Professor, but it's almost, if you're an important player and you're putting bums on seats, you get a reduced sentence. It's a bit like O.J. Simpson getting off a murder because he makes a good movie. I don't know. To me, that's how it struck me a bit. It shouldn't really be relevant whether you're a popular player, whether the fans want to see you. If you've done something wrong, you should be out of the game. And I do feel for the Parramatta fans who perhaps were lining up against a player who shouldn't have been there.
Paul, it's what I call the attractive person syndrome. That's not just physically attractive, because Nick Kyrgios is not physically attractive. But if you're really good at something, I think you get a fair bit of leniency that others just don't get. You just imagine somebody in a local tennis tournament, Cooter, smashing 2 rackets. Well, it probably wouldn't be seen next week. But so I think that's what it is. It's the attractive person syndrome.
It's a newish concept because the Storm not that long ago lost a grand final 40-0 against Manly due to the absence of Cameron Smith. And it was a grey area, that decision. But if you wanted fans and you wanted to have even contests, you would have allowed Cameron Smith to get off and play in that match. So it's very interesting that he's taken that view. I just don't think that's, as we say, Judge, natural justice, procedural fairness. So I don't think it's relevant whether the player's going to attract the fans or not. The punishment's a punishment.
Well, Peter V'landys coming out and he's basically said, well, the fans want to see them. So, it's all about the fans. Well, surely that can't be good for the sport overall if Peter V'landys is just going to come in, forget the judiciary and just make the decision himself.
Well, there's good analysis during the week, a comparison, because V'landys wears 2 hats, or in this case, a jockey's cap. He runs the Racing New South Wales. There was a comparison in that they often allow jockeys to ride and they suspend their sentence so that they can compete in your Cox Plates or your Melbourne Cups. The interesting analysis about that, though, is it's about the horse and it's about the punters who've invested the money. It's purely gambling horse racing, as we know, as much as we love it. People that have invested on that horse having a particular jockey would be penalised. Here, we've got a rugby league fan who perhaps is a touch annoyed that a certain player isn't playing. Very different to a man sitting on top of the main attraction, which is the horse.
Paul, I thought it was also interesting this week when they started asking the commentators and those that and Gus Gould. So you ask people like Gus Gould and Nathan Cleary. I haven't heard from Greg Alexander yet, but I assume that he's okay with it as well. At the end of the day, isn't this just showing that the sport still doesn't get it?
I think Gus Gould went as far as defending him. I think he said he was toning things down. All I saw was a man being thrown through the air by a pretty well-built rugby league player. I don't know how that's Dalai Lama type pacifist behaviour, but I must have seen the wrong footage.
Paul, if that box had been 6 inches close to that guy's head, it wouldn't have been an assault. It would have been a very serious injury because he threw him at quite a speed.
It's very similar to Gordon Tallis and Brett Hodgson that time when he threw him over the sideline like it was a smallish packet of potatoes. It was terrible footage.
But again, no, this is where, and have we heard from the actual CEO of the NRL? Has he been commented or has he been quoted at all around how this occurred? Or is it, again, you've got a chairman that seems to run the game, and I would call him to be a loose cannon.
Now, we only hear from Andrew Abdo, the South African, the boss of it all, when it's positive news. Normally, it's a very good day for the Codes today. So they bring out Peter the attack dog when there's the nasty stuff, but Mr. Abdo seems to only speak when it's good stuff to talk about.
We don't need that Russian video up, Professor. No.
Forgive me for the accent.
Paul, I did have a chuckle last night on Twitter, though, or on Friday night when May was sin-binned during the match, and up on Twitter came, he's sin-binned and he'll have to serve the penalty immediately. Yes.
It actually, the scary thing is the Panthers will get to it, but they're looking that hot. I don't think they really needed him out there because they've got a player who is just setting all sorts of records in Nathan Cleary. If we can jump into that, it's 5 weeks since he was away. I actually thought the Eels were a chance. I'm lucky I didn't invest any hard-earned on the Eels because it would have been gone pretty quickly. The Ivan and Nathan Cleary show, there was some eyebrows raised given the amount they spent on the two Clearys, but it's looking like money well spent because they're 1 win away from making their third grand final in 3 years. And despite the fact there's 7 teams remaining, they are under $2 to win it all. So it's the Cleary show that is steamrolling the NRL.
Do you think it was of benefit that the Panthers rested the majority of their team in the last round when there was nothing to win or lose? Because in the first half, I was thinking that they looked a little bit off song, and maybe at 7-6 at half time, it might have been a mistake, but it certainly didn't look a mistake in the second half.
By the end, they were Hillsong. If you think they were missing a beat in the first half, I can tell you that ScoMo never sung in tune so well. They were amazing, and I think I wouldn't do that. I'm a big believer in momentum, and if we want to talk about momentum, we could talk about the Canberra Raiders, much like we often talk about wildcard teams in baseball and NFL. The Raiders have been playing every game like it's a grand final, and I wouldn't have rested the Panthers players, but I'm not Ivan Cleary, and he seems to be doing a pretty good job in his methodology.
Okay. You mentioned the Raiders. Paul, I was asked for, on Friday night early, I was asked for 2 certainties to back for this weekend, and I said, take the $4 that they're offering on the Raiders because the Storm aren't playing well, and even though the Storm are at home, the Raiders look good. And I also told someone to take the $3.50 for the Brisbane Lions. So that was 2 pretty good pieces of advice I gave out on Friday night, and the person who took the advice rang me to thank me.
Yeah, could you add me to that list for next time? I'm very happy for that person. Good on you. They just collected big time. Probably don't have to work again, but that wasn't too far off. It was a good tip on the Raiders. The Storm I haven't certainly said that they're specials all year. They've just been missing something. That something was Pappenhausen. What it also was Jerome Hughes not playing a big part of the game. Cameron Munster at fullback wasn't able to dominate, even though he played well. He wasn't good enough to overcome the Jack Whiten show, and they've got so much power at that team, that Raiders team, and they just steamrolled the Storm, and they actually did a storm on the Storm, if we could use that analogy. The Storm haven't lost at this stage since 2014, and it might be Chinese whispers, but apparently Craig Bellamy was overheard saying, I am too old for this shit, forgive the wording on this family-friendly program, but I'm surprised he could get any words out because he looked pretty annoyed. and it was a sad exit for some of the Storm veterans there. Brandon Smith off to the Roosters, the Bromwich brothers and Kafusi. Not a great way, and to farewell Storm Park. And Bellamy was most annoyed that it was the defensive lapses that led to that loss, because if there's one thing Bellamy's known for, it's defence. And I think the attacking players he's had over the years have taken care of that side of things with your Cooper Cronks and your Inglis, your Cameron Smiths. But the defence let them down, and the Raiders almost put up 30 points on the Storm in a final at Storm headquarters. That wouldn't happen years ago, and it's happening now, and it's not good signs for the Storm.
The Brandon Smith has been an interesting one this year. I think that you don't like to say a player's checked out, but I think his performances this year were so far off what he delivered last year and probably what the Roosters were wanting, so that they're calling the umpire or the referee, a cheat. He's been injured. I don't think he did himself any favours this year or improved his standing within the game. And we know he wants to play hooker. I don't know if he's a genuine hooker. When the Storm played him at lock, he seemed to relish a little bit in that role. But his performances this year probably represented the way the Storm were at the end of the day, Paul, and they were up and down too. Their best and worst was so far apart. As you said, defensively this year, it's been one of their points for and against indicates it's been a great year. But at the same time, I suspect that they've given up a lot more tries from defensive mistakes than what they have in previous years.
I think you'd have them in the flat track bully category, unfortunately. And when Brandon Smith, it was very early in the season, said, I'm picturing myself winning a premiership in a Roosters jersey. I can't imagine getting away with that in any professional code, but particularly at the Storm. I wish I was there when Craig Bellamy heard that, because that's just wrong. I mean, you can change clubs, and we have a system where you're allowed to sign for another team, but at least for external purposes, you've got to show that you're committed to your current employee. You can't be talking about winning a flag at your new club. I mean, that was unforgivable. I just don't think there was the cohesion there at the Storm this year. And that for and against, as I said, is largely dominated by massive wins against poor clubs. They just haven't been the Storm of old this year. So there's something missing there. Pappenhausen missing wasn't ideal, but you can't just put it down to one player. I'm worried about Brandon Smith, but being not particularly a Roosters fan, is he's going to do a Luke Keary. And forever Russell Crowe will be remembered for telling Luke Keary you're overpaid, goes to our biggest rival and wins him the comp. So thanks for that, Rusty. Sometimes I wish the Lions might have got him in Gladiator, but no, I didn't say that. No, that was not one of his better moments on the red and green side of things.
Paul, Ricky Stewart, 5 matches before the end of the season, he was done at Canberra, and I reckon he was close to being sacked. He's performed all sorts of miracles, A, to get them into the finals, B, to win the first one. He just seems to be able to produce something out of the hat when he needs it.
Well, I think we had the red pen out at one stage, and we might have had the sports fan Stan sack him, but we've got a rare need for the eraser on the red pen, because it's not often I get the big red biro out and out goes the team and they come back in. So that was a miracle that they made it in. But that is the most dangerous team in esports, a team with nothing to lose. More importantly, a team that's been playing like every match is a grand final. And the urgency is there, and they are playing just to survive. Ricky Stewart's been through a lot lately, as we know, but that's taking away from what is a very, very talented team. They've got some very good players there. Jack Whiten is still in the best 5 in the game. It's unfortunate that he can't play his regular role for the Blues, so he plays a more utility role. But they've got some superstar talent there, and those big forwards are going to take them a long way into these finals, I think.
Saturday, last night, Paul, probably the match of the round so far, all tied up at halftime, all tied up at full time, all tied up after extra time, and it took Golden Point with a 2-point field goal to separate the teams The Cowboys got out of jail, I thought, down 30-22 with 10 minutes to play.
And that man, we love a dream on this show more than Walt Disney. The man Valentine Holmes, who went to the NFL because he had a dream. I always said it's a shame because he's such a good rugby league player. Chad Townsend refers to him as the Iceman. And I think when you've got a player referring to another player as being ice cold, that shows you how good he is under pressure. And quite amusingly, the coach of the Cowboys after the match said he missed 3 from there in the warm-up. So if that doesn't show you that he's a big moment player, nothing does. That was a very good win. I had the Sharks as winning that. But to let 32 points in, Craig Fitzgibbon's a very renowned defensive coach. He wouldn't be happy with that at all. He rarely looks happy anyway, Craig Fitzgibbon, but he wasn't happy in the press conference giving up 32 points in a final at home, no less.
It was fairly significant, Paul, Connor Tracy being sent off at 72 minutes because the Cowboys did all the damage after that.
He had a terrible game, Connor Tracy. I think Nico Hines couldn't have played much better. Matt Moylan is turning back the clock, but I just think they had. That's what happens in finals. You make errors like that, and that cost them. That Connor Tracy, it was largely on his shoulders. As much as I hate to blame one player, the Sharks they could have won that game and probably should have.
All right, today, Paul, 4:05 this afternoon, the Reckoning. Your Rabbitohs playing the Roosters. How can they improve to get past last week's 26-16 beating?
I didn't even know it was on. No, I've been thinking about it all day. So I'm just trying to work out if I watch it at home or head somewhere, a licensed venue. Because either way, at the end, I think I'll need a beverage after this. I actually think the Rabbitohs will win this game. I think that it's a big match for Cody Walker, who's playing for a new contract. It'll be a massive game. We've got some good ends, so I'm really looking forward to it. I don't think each team played all their cards in that matchup because it really didn't count for much. So, yes, the Roosters won it, but I'm actually feeling quite confident about the Rabbitohs' chances this afternoon. Latrell Mitchell up against Tedesco is going to be amazing. Cameron Murray had a head knock, a pretty bad one last week, and that's in the things that make you go, category. He is playing today somehow. Must have passed. Well, there has to be an independent doctor involved. So I don't know if that independent doctor was from Redfern, but Cameron Murray's playing. It'll be similar scenario to Mitchell Moses for the Eels. Be interesting to see if he suddenly makes a miracle recovery from concussion to take his spot next week. But Cameron Murray there is probably our best player. So that it gives me the confidence to think we're right in this, right up to the big chance of winning it at a decent outsider odds.
Judge, you may want to see, excuse me, you may want to see the Cameron Murray hit from last week and wonder how the hell he's playing this week. It staggers me to think that he's going to play, Paul, after the scenes from last week.
I'm staggered every week whenever I see the State of Origin and they're back playing the same week. Now, they are the most fit and tough sports people getting around. I totally accept that. It's amazing.
We talked Walt Disney before. He was in Disneyland last week, so I am stunned that he's playing. I'm not a doctor, of course, but it didn't look like he'd be able, if they do have a rule that you should have a week off, I'm stunned that he passed all the tests, but there is independence involved, so it's not simply the Rabbitohs doctor rubber stamping that he plays.
All right, Paul. Final score there for those who like to have a gamble on the game and bet responsibly.
22-16. I think the Rabbitohs will prevail, and I'll be horse tomorrow. Thankfully for everyone.
Now, Paul, one of the best kept secrets going around at the moment is that the NRLW is playing, and they're up to actually round 4.
They are. I don't know if the crowds are eclipsing the AFL women's side of things, but there has been 4 games. There are only the 5 games across the 7 weeks. So there are 6 teams this year, 5 rounds, as I said, semi-finals of the top 4. We've got 3 teams on 3 wins, but the Dragons have played 1 more match. So the standout teams are the Roosters and the Knights. It's good to see some joy for the Newcastle area, which is a fine rugby league part of the world. Those 2 teams likely will make it through to the grand final. But you've then got one of the teams out of the Broncos, Titans and Eels, who've got 2 wins between all 3 of them, will have to make the top 4. So that'll be the outsider of the crew.
Well, we might have criticisms, Paul, of how these things are scheduled. But one thing I will say, kudos to the NRL with their NRLW. At least there are 6 teams. Each team plays each other once. So it can't be fairer than that to decide who make the top 4.
No, and you've got the top point scorers called Zahara Tamara. So that's a good name there. What easy one to remember. Touch disappointed, though. I looked to find the stats on the NRL official app, and you can only get last year's stats. So maybe they just updated annually the game there at the NRL app department. But that's something they might want to get cracking on.
Well, you might, and the lead in today too, as well, Professor. You've actually got the women's rugby starting in about 10 to 15 minutes, and it is the Knights playing the Roosters, and it's actually being telecast into Melbourne on the 9 secondary channel, 9 Gems. So,
which you can watch in HD, which is more than they get in Sydney. Yeah.
And being refereed by Belinda Sharp. So terrific to see an all-girl crew there.
Absolutely. So, and it's great to watch. It's a great sport.
Oh, they get stuck in. There's no nonsense. It's going to be a good match today. Top 2 teams. So they've got the Roosters at $1.25, but I actually think the Knights could do a professor there for your lucky mate who gets those tips, $4. The Knights. Maybe you could text him that one, Professor, just to add a bit more to his kitting.
Yeah, I will. All right. Now, we might finish the show today with the AFL announced during the week that there was a $4.5 billion TV rights deal, which will keep 7 West and Foxtel broadcasting the matches until 2032. The AFL chairman, Judge, said there's a lot of mouths to feed out of that money. And one of them might be Tasmanian AFL side. What are your thoughts on whether it looks any better than it did before the deal?
It doesn't, Professor, I'm afraid. In fact, the problem is that Gill's on his farewell tour. He's ticking off all the boxes. Women's football, it never existed before Gill got there. Now it's happened. Broadcast rights never existed before Gill got there. Now it's all happening. Tasmania wasn't a state before Gill got there. Now it's happening. If I can just talk about AFL speak, because this is sort of crap that they listen to, Professor. They're thinking of China and India, because that's got 2 billion people. So they think, oh, gee, we'll get 1%, we'll get 20 million people. Can I just tell you, there's a place, Professor, that's got more rabid AFL supporters than China and India combined. It's got an established football culture. It's got grounds. It's got a government that backs it. And it's got people that want to go and see it. And that place is called Tasmania. Now, if the AFL can just listen to that kind of logic, it is the greatest no-brainer of all time. It won't happen because it needs 3 things. It needs a stadium, it needs players, and it needs money. And I ain't got any of that. And we were supposed to have a decision in August, if you recall. The presidents are all going to talk. Now it might be this month. Well, there's actually finals on this month. That won't happen. Gill will sort of get on his plane and take off. And I'm really worried that it's just left to rot, this whole Tasmanian thing. And the last words I heard Gill say was, it's all in Tasmania's court. I thought it was all in the AFL's court and Gordoy's court. So I'm very worried about where this Tasmanian thing's heading, Professor.
The thing that surprised me is that Goyder said, allegedly during the week, that the reason there's been no decision yet is because they haven't been able to get all the presidents together in the one room.
I see.
Yeah. As an excuse, Judge, where would you rate that excuse amongst all the excuses you've heard about why something hasn't happened?
Yeah, well, Kevin Sheedy used to say there are reasons, there are excuses, and that's not a reason. That is an absolute cop-out excuse of the highest level. I actually wish Gordon would get out of the game. I just don't think he's got a feel for the game. I don't think the commission has got a feel for the game. And it's that lack of genuine understanding about the real culture and drivers of our game that's holding the game back. I don't know what he sees, but he just sees 18 teams, a great grand final. Here you go, buddy. Here's a Premiership Cup. Here's a Brownlow. That's AFL for him, done and dusted. Where it's a very visceral game, Aussie rules, and we love it. Knows Tasmania love it. He doesn't share that love. And so that excuse really annoys me, to be honest.
Could I say, Judge, that if a name that we've used, Paul, on this show quite a lot, Peter Volandis, was in charge of the AFL, Tasmania it had already been decided, wouldn't it?
Done and dusted. He would have done it over the weekend, and he would have rang the presidents and said, "By the way, guys, it's been done, and get ready for 19-team league." If that's, which I don't like, but if that's what happened, that's what would happen. But he just get it done and dusted. He's a can-do kind of guy.
But the press conference the other day, we talked about embarrassing. That was just, I've never seen so many people with their hands in pockets playing with balls. It was honestly just embarrassing. And the way that they were saying it was a thorough process and it was hard, and Gil's done an amazing job. And I'm thinking, the football sells itself, doesn't it? The actual product, we've seen an amazing final series in both the AFL and the Nrlw. And let's go back to the fact that this rights deal is going to get to grassroots. Did I hear that, Professor, that we're going to get some grassroots support? Now, what that looks like, that'll be in facilities or it'll be something along those lines. The AFL, and because that's who they are, there's not an Australian Rules Commission or anything like that. It's the AFL Commission, right? They would not know anything about grassroots community local football. They wouldn't know how clubs are struggling. They wouldn't know the battle that the umpires have currently got. They're delusional. They're so delusional, so out of touch with anything in reality.
I've said it before, though, the AFL reminds me of a political party. They're like a government. They just set up these platitudes and the masses are supposed to swallow it and say, oh, yeah, that's we'll accept that. We're not stupid. Stupid people run the game, but stupid people don't follow the game. And we know what's going on. And I'm frankly surprised there's not more of a groundswell grassroots uproar about those that are allegedly leading our game, because I don't think they are at all. In fact, I don't think they know what they're doing. So
I have to chime in that just with the Volandis, I don't think he would have gone ahead with the GWS and the Gold Coast Suns. I'm not comparing Tasmania to that, but he did say at the time or subsequently that he'd rather invest in the heartland of rugby league than trying to tackle these frontiers, which might be at odds with his bullish persona. But he wouldn't have got ahead with GWS and the Gold Coast, but he may well have ploughed the funds into Tasmania if he was running the AFL.
Which he would deem Tasmania to be an AFL heartland rather than Blacktown and the Gold Coast. So Gold Coast in particular is very transient, although there has been a lot of Victorians move up there this year, but they've already got their teams. They're not going to change team from Richmond to Gold Coast. So, no, I think I just, like, you sit back and you watch it, Judge, and take it for what it is. The rights deal's been done. There's some good changes in that rights deal for TV. So Foxtel will now be able to have their own commentary team for games. So it means that if Luke Darcy or Brian Taylor are doing a game on Channel 7, is that you'll be able to have a Foxtel commentary on as well. So that's one thing. But, yeah, as I said, I just, like, the deal, the money is for football. It's for Australian rules football. And let's see how that goes in the years to come. So are they going to invest it back into Auskick, one of the great programs that was started the best part of 40 years ago, is not what it used to be.
Richard Gordoy thinks grassroots is what grows on the surface of the MCG, Professor, and that's about as big as his understanding goes towards the concept. He had no idea. It is a massive game at what we know to be grassroots level, and he and the Commission only see 18 teams. And that's why I actually don't think they see Tasmania. It just requires too much wit and understanding of the game to even imagine a Tasmanian team for him.
All right, gentlemen, thanks for your participation today. And Judge, thanks for your observations on the AFL. Especially, I like that thinks grassroots is what's growing on the top of the MCG. I like that. Well,
can I say that I'm just trying to get into Paul's area of witticism, but are we going to hear that Norwegian accent again, Professor, or can we ban that?
The South African, you mean?
You call a South African?
Don't be so harsh or nasty.
Others Norwegian. There you go.
All right. Well, we'll finish today with Gelding's tips. So you better get your pen out here, Paul, because this might get you back in the black. Sale, race 2, horse 10, Custodian. Race 3, horse 14, Starian. And race 5, horse 12, Dangers. And at Donald, he's gone for race 3, horse 11, Lara Bell. Race 4, horse 5, Bruno Stars. And race 5, horse 7, Claudia Shiver. Now, I haven't looked at them, but I'm anticipating that at least 5 of those 6 are favourites.
Bruno Stars and Claudia Shiver. Give me a break. Come on.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks for your participation. And until next Sunday, a very good afternoon to you all.
Thanks, boys.
Judge, you can blow out your horse.